the BTS. Let's see if this is connecting. It is. Alright, let me just record it from in here just in case. Record options in here. Figure that out after. Oh, there is a way to record, isn't there? On Teams? There is. Alright. But yeah, we should be okay. I think the streaming has begun. Yeah, we are live. Alright. It is your favorite generic sports guy back with another clip. For today, we'll be discussing the Toronto Blue Jays final year wrap up. So I have a special guest today. His name is Alex. He's like a longtime friend. He's an experienced Toronto Blue Jays fan. And if he doesn't have the answers to sports, then no one else does. Hey Alex, how are you today?
I'm great, Sam. How you doing?
Good man. It's been a well, like awesome week, but kind of getting cold out there now, right? So it's been
It is.
good.
It's hockey season, though. That's okay. It just
Yeah,
means that
like
it's time for hockey.
yes, it is for sure. But before we get into hockey, we do have to discuss the Toronto Blue Jays and like, exactly what did happen to their years. So, how would you describe this year?
Oh boy. Well, the Titanic meets the Hindenburg meets the Bay of Pigs. It was a disaster pretty much from the outset.
Yeah,
I think you and I were both very disappointed with the way the offseason played out. The big move was to try and bring in Shohei Ohtani with for good reason, and it seemed like that was plan A, and there was no real plan B, and that came back to bite them in the rear end, unfortunately, because they returned essentially the exact same team, assumed that they would get internal improvement, and instead got internal regression, which is even worse. And so it's not even as though the team performed the same. Things started off very badly from the very beginning. We had some injuries in spring training, and the team never really found their footing, and it resulted in a very disappointing season.
yeah, no, exactly. And honestly, I wanted to just yeah highlight that as well. Even though we did come out of spring training pretty well, like there were some like stars besides Shohei Ohtani that I was pretty happy about. Springer obviously he got a little bit older, but we still thought he would produce at a good rate. Obviously, David Schneider, what we expected, what he did at the beginning of August last year will be the exact same what we'll get throughout the whole year. Obviously, we did not. But no, honestly, if the start of the year was nice, Jose Barrera he was on the mound again. He was our ace, and just having him just to do what he does best is consistency is
Hmm.
amazing. Obviously, right? Obviously, what happened last year when him being yanked in the fourth inning of that game was horrible, right? It was absolutely
The
horrendous,
most
but
boneheaded decision in playoff history, but anyway, well,
yeah, yeah, we're
maybe that's a living
gonna,
cage for him
yeah.
against the Yankees.
No, but honestly, there have been some highs that I do want to discuss about that too. I think
Mm.
D- Dalton Varsho and his like defensive performance has been incredible. I hope he does win the Gold Glove this year. We will see what happens. But is there
Yeah.
anyone that's kind of like outstood for you this year?
I mean, the easy one that stood out for me was obviously Vladdy. I mean,
Yeah.
the reason being there have been a lot of questions about Vladdy. Obviously, when he first entered the league, his first couple of years, we saw a steady improvement, and then we saw a few years in the interim where it kind of leveled off. His
Mm.
development didn't really go to the next level in the way that a lot of people expected, and so when it came to talking about long-term extensions, a lot of people were asking the question: Is he really a franchise player?
Mm.
And I think the way he performed this year offensively demonstrated that he is, in fact, if not a franchise player in the sense that somebody like Shohei Ohtani is, but maybe a tier two cornerstone franchise player that you can still build around. If you look at him statistically, 30 home runs, over 100 RBIs, I believe 322 batting average, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken, and an OPS plus well over 100. Like he had a terrific year by all accounts, and he was the lone bright spot offensively. I know Varsho had a great start to the season offensively, unfortunately petered out, but to me, Vladdy was the big bright light in the on the roster. The other beacon of hope that I saw was Chad Green. I mean, if we're talking about guys who finished the season on the team, Yimi Garcia had a great year during the season.
Yeah.
Obviously, when we moved Jimmy to, I believe it was Miami, or was it
Seattle
Milwaukee?
was it?
Seattle. You're right. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Seattle.
Um, they moved him out and ended up recouping some assets, which wasn't a bad move. But from the bullpen, I thought Chad Green actually stood out as a legitimate bullpen option for them going forward because there's beyond him and maybe Genesis Cabrera, Ryan Yarbrough, there really wasn't a whole lot that stood out in that bullpen that's salvageable going forward. So those are the bright spots to me. And again, like you mentioned, Jose Barrios had another great year.
He is the definition of consistency. Like, I think he did not miss a start at all. I think he's incredible. But I wanted to just say the standout for sure is Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And he did not have a hot start, right? He had his woes where he could not hit for anything, right? He had 100 different hitting coaches speak to him, just stating what could he actually do. But at the
Hmm.
same time, he is a he is what we need in a Toronto Blue Jays player, where we do understand he has his flaws, he has his like issues, like hitting and stuff, but he's able to get out of it. But he has a good attitude about it, right? And that's
Yeah,
what we need as an actual player in our league.
I think he matured this year, and that's one thing that we really
Yeah,
observed was the way he matured, not only as a player and as an individual, but in terms of his plate approach as well. He was no longer the Uh, not that he was always a free swinging guy, but there were times where he would swing out of his shoes and go after pitches that weren't really pitches that he was going to have a high probability
yeah,
of driving to the outfield. And this year he changed his approach and he was more selective with what he was going after, and the results started to pay off, like you said, kind of midway through the season, where he really found his stride and got hot and carried it through to the end of the year. So, we got an answer on the positive side from him and potentially on the negative side from a guy like Bo Bichette, because again, another guy where, the team is trying to decide, is this a long-term piece going forward?
mm,
Is he somebody that we can continue to build around? And I think by the end of the year, the answer to that was more likely no than yes, but I'm curious what your perspective is on that.
yeah. I was just about to say that next. Like you got the highs in Flagro, but you got the lows in Boba who cannot catch a break. I think he came back after one game after
Yeah,
having that like injury to the calf, and I don't know, man, because I feel like he's speaking a lot of things to other reporters outside of our team that he wants to move, right? But at the same time, who else can you really get for his kind of level of the actual work, right? His
yeah,
Yeah, besides this year, right? His stats were good. His hitting was amazing, right? Like his fielding, okay, sure, he might have some errors in here and there, but his offense is what we really needed this year, right? He and Flagler were supposed to be the kind of those two guys that we could always rely on in our lineup, but they weren't there, right? And like you saw what happened. Every time we get anyone on the like bases, we get out, and we're like just like out of the after like the whole game, right? We cannot score runs, and that's what it has been for us for this year as well, right?
yeah.
We just can't score.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a great point because I think the biggest issue for this team is a lack of offensive depth. When you talk about a guy like Bo Bichette has a lot of tools. He's got a lot of
Yes.
offensive tools anyway, where he has the ability to be a great hitter. We saw that last year where he hit very well, and even the year before that, I believe he had 29 home runs. Like
Yes.
he's demonstrated flashes of being an elite hitter. The issue that we've seen with Bichette, or that we saw this year with Bichette, and we've seen in the past too, is his plate discipline, unlike Vladdy, has not really changed in any material
Mm.
way. If I were a pitcher, I'd be throwing the first pitch into the bleachers because I know he's swinging no matter what.
Yeah.
Like there's his approach is, I'm going to swing at the first six pitches no matter what. Hopefully I'll foul two of them off and then I'll get one eventually that I like.
Yeah.
And that's an issue. And so if you're talking about who would they replace him with, it's other guys that are, again, good hitters. I'm not sure if they're any better than him defensively. They're
Yeah.
they're okay to slightly subpar defensive players. Like you look at a guy like Willie Adames in Milwaukee, he's going to be a free agent. He would be a guy who I would be interested in. I don't know if anybody's interested in bringing Gleyber Torres back into a shortstop position. He played there for the Yankees for a while, didn't really work out. They shifted him over to second.
Yeah.
Brandon Lau, again, he's more of a second baseman. There's not a lot of great options. It would have been nice to have seen Orlevis Martinez actually,
Yeah,
prove
that
one way or the
guy.
other if he was a legitimate MLB shortstop,
Yeah.
because that would have potentially answered a lot of questions. But instead, it created more questions than
Yeah.
answers because he had a bit of a brain fart and took himself out of the league for a year. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of question marks when it comes to the shortstop position for sure. But the nice thing about this year in terms of the free agent crop is there are some good players, some good hitters available, and if the Jays front office and the Jays ownership is willing to be proactive,
Hmm.
they have an opportunity to quickly reload on the fly and try and make this a more competitive roster next year.
How do you feel about Alejandro Kirk being your number one like actual catcher next year?
It's
He has
scary.
some highs, like he
He
did pretty
does.
well after the like trade over Jansen, right?
He does. You know what? You got to give him credit. He like Vladdy, it was a tale of two halves for him.
Hmm.
The first half was not so great. The second half, he came into his own. I think with Alejandro Kirk, he's come a long way in terms of calling a game. I think he's come a long way in terms of his defensive chops. I still don't love his blocking. I
Yes.
think he needs to get he needs to get off the one-legged stance. He doesn't have the mobility to be able to react fast enough. And so for that reason, I don't love him as a number one option. I also find him to be a very streaky hitter. And I know Danny Jansen has his ups and downs when it comes to his injuries and to his health and to even to his batting to a certain extent. And so for that reason, I think neither one of them is a true number one catcher. I
Hmm.
think they're both better suited to be in a platoon situation, and I think for that, because of that, they should be looking towards bringing in either bringing Danny Jansen back or finding somebody like a Danny Jansen who can come in and complement Alejandro Kirk, maybe spell him for 50 to 80 games, and if Alejandro plays well and takes the reins, phenomenal. The Jays are better for it. But in the very least, they should have an insurance option ready because they didn't really have a great number two option behind him after Jano was gone.
Yeah, yeah, just about that. Our number two option is pretty much like no like offense. He was just there to catch,
Yeah,
right? He was like
yeah,
not there to hit any runs, to hit any home runs. Like I think our like average for backup catcher was around 220 at the most, which
yeah.
is horrendous, like best. So yeah, we'll see what happens, right? I think there's a lot of free agent signings that we can make, but at the same time, it depends on how we could do with our team.
Hmm.
Who do you think as obviously we did see a lot of all the younger guys come up right for yeah, for this season. Who do you think has a chance to make it yeah, for next year?
Oh, that's a great question. I think Spencer Horwitz to me really demonstrated that he has some long-term potential with the team. Now he's a
Hmm.
bit of an older young player. He's 26 years old.
Yeah.
But Spencer Horwitz came in. He was an above-average hitter. He's got some flexibility defensively. He is essentially what the organization hoped Kevin Biggio would be, but never really amounted to. A guy
Oh
who
yeah.
can play multiple positions but bring some offensive pop. And I really liked him for that reason. The other two guys who really stood out to me were Nathan Lukes and Will Wagner. Both those guys had
Mm.
excellent years offensively. Now, both of them relatively small sample size, but both of them demonstrated that at least they had the potential to be long-term, if not MLB starters, then in the very least bench players. I really like Ernie Clement, but I'm not sure Ernie Clement's a guy that you can plug in and play every single day. The same thing with Davis Schneider. Schneider showed early flashes when he came up last year that he was gonna be an everyday player, and then this year there were times where you could maybe see it coming, but he just over the course of a full season really did not demonstrate that
Mm.
he has the ability to maintain that level of play over 150 plus games, which is what you need to do as an MLB starter. And as we discussed earlier, the team is already too thin offensively to start
Yeah.
just handing away offense in different positions. We've already got Alejandro Kirk, who, like I said before, he's a probably at best a platoon guy. So it's,
Mm.
50% production behind the plate. You're okay at first base. But then after that, where are you really getting your offense from that you can rely on? Like George Springer was awful in the first half, better in the second half, but still a below average hitter at the end of the day. Dalton Varsho was an average hitter, phenomenal defensively, and for that reason, I want to keep him. I think he's a guy that you can plug in center field and be very happy with. But where else are you getting offense from? Bo wasn't healthy and didn't have a good year. Left field was a rotation of guys all year long. Second base and third base, again, were a rotation of different guys all year long, and so they need to go out and they need to add multiple big bats here to try and insulate Vladdy
Mm.
because I think that'll ultimately benefit him offensively too. If teams know that he's the only real threat in the lineup, they're
Yeah.
not going to pitch to him. They're going to try and pitch around him. If you can, insulate him a little bit, you can put a guy in front of him and behind him who can actually hit. I'd love to, pie in the sky add Juan Soto. I don't think that's likely,
I heard some
but
rumors today.
did you?
Yeah,
Okay,
I did.
May-
I
let's hear it.
heard some rumors. After, well, obviously he's still in the playoffs, but they're going to go on aggressive hunt for him next year in the off
Okay.
season, obviously. But no, I wanted to just make sure you got your point out. Um, I think you're right about David Schneider. I think we've seen enough from him where he's not there. He's not going to be on our roster. I think I hate to say he's a good guy. He seems awesome, but he played around too much with his like mechanics throughout the year where he was doing a one leg kick, he was doing compound, like he was doing a lot of
The
things
slide step.
where, right? Yeah. He was just doing like a lot of things where he wasn't too sure of himself, right? And if you're like that in the beginning of your career, then he's going to just keep doing the same thing over and over again. I hope he does make it. Maybe not with us, but I hope he does get and starts somewhere else if he needs to. Yeah, like honestly, after Vladimir Guerrero, you have Spencer Horwitz and Alexander Kirk behind him. It's like, yeah, pretty much our whole lineup was him. If he was out of the lineup, like who else did we really have, right? Like,
Exactly. And here's the thing, if you look at this rotation, so we still got a playoff rotation. I know Chris Bassett had a bit of a down year, but he's still a guy who I would be comfortable putting in as, my third,
yeah.
maybe fourth starter in the playoffs. I think he's a guy that you can rely on. Kevin Gossman is still in his prime. We still have obviously Barrios in his prime.
Mm.
If they get anything from Manoa next year, that'll be a minor
Who?
miracle.
Wait, who are you
No.
talking about?
But if you look at this team, this is supposed to the point that I was trying to make was this is supposed to be the contention window right now.
Yeah.
Like we're in Vladimir Guerrero's prime years. If he's the best player, if he's the franchise cornerstone, you got to try and build the team around him now when he's at his best. And that means that you don't really have time to wait for guys like Addison Barger or Davis Schneider or Ernie Clement to really develop themselves as full-time starters in the MLB. You got to plug guys in, unfortunately, and you got to have confidence that they're going to be able to play and play at a high level right away, because now is the time they got to go for it.
Yeah.
This is not the Chicago White Sox where they're playing for 6 years from now. We're playing for right now because if Vladdy doesn't resign on extension, 2 3 years down the line, I'm not sure where Gossman's going to be.
Mm.
The team could look very different if they don't start competing in a very short period. So, we waited a while for them to get into the contention window. We're in it now, and they need to do everything that they can to capitalize on it. They spent a lot of money to renovate the Rogers Center. I don't think they did that to have them only
For
play
the
from
team? Yeah.
April to September. I think they want some October dates in there.
Yeah. But like I do like to say that our general manager, he did like he does know that he made a lot of mistakes in our last off season. He put all of his like eggs in one basket, and when that did not happen the way he wanted to, he did not have option two. He did not have option number two or three or four after that, right? He pretty much put everything on Shohei Ohtani, and then after that, we got Justin Turner and some other guys, right? So it's kind of like yeah, who else do we really need, right? But to touch on your point, I think got one in mind that the number four like outfielder for us being for Lucas. I think he is mature enough to be in our lineup. I think
Mhm.
we should give him the opportunity. I think we should. We'll see how he does during the spring training. But you're absolutely right. This is our window, and I think it all depends on how we go about this offseason, right? Are we going to sign him to long term? Are we going to keep Bo Bichette? Are we going to keep the other players? Are we going to be able to get rid of Springer? Because I'm gonna be
Yeah.
honest with you, I don't see Springer as our leadoff guy. Okay.
No. I think George Springer has to be your either he's got to be your DH or your fourth outfielder, and unfortunately at this point in
Yeah,
his career. And I'm not trying to, be down on George Springer. I've really liked what he brought to the
yeah,
team, but I think we also have to be honest about where he is in his career and his trajectory as a player going forward. I'd love to say, they should be moving up Bichette and bringing in some different assets. The problem is Bichette had a bad year where he was hurt and he's in the last year of his contract.
yeah,
It may be challenging to find a team who's going to give them the type of return that they feel they need to make it worthwhile. And that's going to be something that I'm interested to see in the offseason, how they handle that, because they need to get some, as we've talked about, they need more offense. They need some clarity on where that offense is going to come from, and I don't think they can go in with question marks as to whether or not Bo Bichette's going to be the guy, or if they're going to have to go out and find somebody else to replace that offense.
yeah. Well, I don't know if you heard the news already or not, but our hitting coach that we had, Gilbert Martinez, or
Yeah,
whoever he is, he's already gone. I think half our
he's
coaches
gone.
are gone,
Yeah,
and that's awesome. I think he was horrendous. He was terrible. I think after we got yeah, Hunter Mensch and Matt Hugh or Matt Fugue or something from like AAA, I think then we
yeah.
started hitting a bit more, right? We got more offense back.
Well,
I'm
if you look at
happy
the
he's
offense
gone.
from the last 5 years, like I think the he arrived in 2019.
Yeah,
It has been a steady decline from 2019 through to 2024. It's not been a promising tenure for him, unfortunately, for his career going forward. But
yeah,
nonetheless, like you said, they've turned the page. We've got some different voices in the room, and in the ears of the hitters on the team. I think that will improve things. How much it's going to improve things, 5%, 10%, that remains to be seen. We'd obviously love to see another, Jose Batista, where a guy comes in and he worked with Cito Gaston and Gene Tennis, if I'm not mistaken,
yeah.
who was the hitting coach at the time, and they turned around his swing, got him to open his hips way faster, and completely unlocked the potential that he
Hmm.
had. So I don't know if they've got that in there, but what they've got to do is they've got to make those incremental improvements with their approach at the plate, and then see if they can supplement the roster around them.
Yeah. I was just about to add on. No, you're absolutely right, and I think they know this as well. I think from them to move on from their coaches that are not doing too well is a good sign, but the free agent market is pretty good as well. I really like Anthony Sandair from the Orioles. I think
Mm.
he would be a good addition to our line. How do you feel about him?
Love him, actually. He's one of the guys that had circled on my list of free agent offense that I'd love to get.
Oh,
He's
his
got
swing,
he's got no
man.
defense, but he is all power, and
Who
he's
cares about the
all
defense?
he's
We
all
we
offense.
got like our whole lineup is in defense. We need offense
Yeah,
now, man.
exactly. Like I'd love to get him or Marcelo Zena in there as a DH, or even honestly, Pete Alonso would
P.
be
Alonso.
intriguing to me. I know a lot of GMs don't love the idea of investing big money in a guy who is just a pure offensive play, but that's what the team needs. Like,
Yeah.
let's be frank, like the team needs offense, and if they have to park him on the bench as a DH, and he only goes up there once every nine hitters and doesn't see the field, that's fine.
Yeah, I'm
That's
okay
what
with
they
that.
need. Yeah. We 2 years ago, what they did was they moved out offense. We moved out Teoscar.
Mm,
We moved out Gurriel, and the whole point was we were trying to get better defensively. Sacrifice offensive runs to save defensive runs.
yeah.
Well, I think we saw that really hasn't materialized in the way that they needed it to. You still need offense. You still need to have the ability to generate runs. and be able to come back in games. I know I messaged you about this yesterday. They had 51 games where they scored 2 or fewer runs.
Mm,
That's a
yeah.
third of the season where you're not even hitting 3 runs, and 3 runs, which is a very pedestrian number. There were 78 games that they failed to score more than 3 runs in, and you can't expect to win like that.
Mm,
As great as their pitching is, the starting pitching, at some point you got to hand it over to the bullpen, which
yeah.
obviously did not hold up very well this year. But you also, if you have one bad inning, if that with that kind of run production, you're basically out of the game,
Yeah.
and that can't happen for a team to be a competitive, contender. So I'd love to see one of those guys, whether that's Santander or Ozuna, or even bringing back Teoscar Hernandez. Like they need to bring back somebody who can add some legitimate pop to this lineup.
Yeah. I was about to say, speaking of Hernandez, he just hit a grand slam last night. So
He did.
he,
He had a great year in Los Angeles.
oh my
Honest to God,
God.
I don't understand the logic around trading him. I really like Swanson. I think Eric Swanson, when he gets himself right. I know he had a really tough offseason in spring training, and went through some personal issues, but
Hmm.
I think that trade has not really aged very well for the Blue Jays, because not only was Teoscar a tremendous offensive player, he was part of the heartbeat and the fabric of that organization. And I think when they lost him, they lost a little bit of that swagger that he brought to the field, and they need that. They're in desperate need of some identity.
No, you're absolutely right. How would you rate John Schneider this year, a whole year with him as our manager?
Hmm. To be honest with you, not highly.
Mm,
I I don't hate John Schneider, but at the same time, I don't think that he brings a whole lot to the table in terms of his strategic decision making through the season. I part of me wishes that the Jays had a more experienced front office, or a more experienced manager who has the presence to be able to say, I'm going to manage the game my way. I'm thinking a Dusty Baker,
mm,
or an old school Jim Leland, somebody of that ilk who has been around the game a very long time and is not going to get second guessed or have upper management, whomever that might be. We never got a clear answer as to who that was last year. Trying to feed information into the clubhouse and say, this is how you should be managing the team. I think John Schneider has at times been a very inefficient decision maker when it comes to how he manages the bullpen, how he manages the starters. I think there's too many voices, and I think they just need to calm the noise, and they need to bring somebody in who's just purely a baseball guy. Not to say that the statistics don't matter; they do, but they need somebody who can come in and have enough presence to say, "I will be the ultimate decision maker.
mm.
Every decision begins and ends with me, and everybody else can focus on their own role." Oh, I think I lost my earbuds there. There we
Oh,
go.
it's okay. Uh, I was just gonna add on how do you feel about switching Vlad Guerrero to third base for next year?
It depends on what happens in the off season. I am not against it. I think there are other options available that they could acquire through the offseason. Alex Bregman to me would be a guy who stands out as a better defensive option than Vladdy while still bringing offense to the position. Uh, and I think he would be preferable to having Vladdy at third base. That being said, I didn't mind Vladdy at third base
Mm.
this year.
He was good. He has a
Uh,
good arm, man.
he does. He's got a great arm. I think the thing that people they see his arm and they get excited. The problem that we have is that we haven't had enough of a sample size. Like, I think he can probably do it, but the thing is, they haven't let him do it for a full year, and I think that works against him, because as long as he gets further and further into his career where he hasn't really had the opportunity to demonstrate that he can be that everyday third baseman, that doubt still lingers. And that's where, again, I'd go back to wanting that safety blanket with somebody who
Mm.
I know has played the position and has played it at a high level, like an Alex Bregman. But if they don't bring in somebody like that who can, be a better defensive option at third base, I'm all for giving him that opportunity, and then allocating first base to somebody who's maybe not as defensively stout, but still brings a big offensive punch.
Yeah.
They need to find a way to work runs into this offense one way or another, and the corners really have to be power positions for a team. I think if you look historically, that's how a lot of winning teams have built their rosters. You got to have
Yeah.
power at the corners.
No, dude, that's a good point. That's actually like an excellent point because I'm gonna want him to move the other side, but at the same time, I think they were being more cautious with him because they don't want him to get hurt. Because he did play a
Hmm.
whole year, right? And I think they know that, yeah, they know that if they move him to another position for a whole year, he may get some injuries.
Hmm.
Obviously, how do you feel about, well, I heard some rumors. How do you feel about, well, Trout moving to first base? Because obviously he's been getting hurt for the last a year or two now as well, right? I think those like,
Forever.
yeah, forever. Honestly, I feel terrible for him because he has not made it to the playoffs in so long. Like he's been a trooper on his team. He
Yeah.
just lost Shohei Ohtani. Like, oh my gosh, come on, man.
Yeah. I think for guys like that, uh, I know Vladdy's had his injury history at times as well
Hmm.
during his career, but obviously not to the same extent as Mike Trout. To me, this reminds me a little bit of Sidney Crosby
Oh,
in the middle of his career when he had concussion issues, and you looked at him and you said, "This guy's way too good to not be out there every single day."
hmm.
Like as a fan, you feel robbed because he's obviously one of the best players of this generation. I think probably until Shohei showed up, everybody would unanimously say he's the
Mike
best player of
Trout,
this
yeah.
generation, and then Shohei came into his backyard and said, "Move over, pal. Hold my beer." But I would absolutely be in favor of moving him over to first base, or even, stick him at DH. I know he probably wouldn't love it,
Yeah.
but you got to protect that asset because he's way too good to not be playing on an everyday basis.
And I think he's still on like a long-term contract, so I think they should. But who are you going for right now to yeah, to actually win the whole thing?
I actually was really I kind of had a soft spot for the Phillies this year. They've been a great team for a few years now, and I was hoping for them to pull through. Of the teams that are left, it pains me to say this as a Jays fan, but I think I'd like to see the Yankees win.
Yeah,
It's been a while, and I mean, as a Leafs fan, saying the Yankees haven't won in a
I
while
know.
is a bit
Yeah,
comical, but but the there's something about baseball where the Yankees need to be competitive for it
they
to
do.
feel right.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see them at least get to the World Series. I think they're the most deserving team coming out of the American
Mm.
League. Going on the National League side, you I know a lot of people are gonna want to say the Dodgers, but me personally, I actually would kind of like to see the San Diego Padres get through. I think
Really?
that San Diego team's got a little bit of bite. They've got a little bit of grittiness to them. They never back down from a fight, and I think that would be one hell of a series to see the Yankees and the Padres go toe to toe. Mets and Yankees would be cool too, even if we can get a Subway Series again
Yeah.
for the first time since 2000, if I'm not mistaken. But I'd really love to see Yankees Padres, and then I think it's going to be the Evil Empire who's going to take it down.
No, that's good. Before we end, is there any other sponsorships you have? Anything you'd like to promote from your side?
Hey, if anybody wants to check out our podcast, they can listen to Prescribing Prosperity. We cover all topics from financial matters to health and wellness. And actually, coming up, we're going to do an episode on professional sports. We're going to have a tax specialist come on and talk
Oh
about
wow.
why the Canadian teams are at a disadvantage when it comes to taxation here in Canada. So, if anybody's interested, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to your favorite podcast.
Like I will have those like other links below, so you guys will have them as well. But no, that's awesome, Alex, and it's always really good to catch up with you. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, but I hope you have a good night, my friend.
Thanks, you too, Sam. Thank you for having me on, and go Leafs, go.
Yes.